I have a confession to make. I have not been a Geelong supporter for the entire time I've been watching football. Scandalous, I know, albeit I think mine isn't the worst example of changing teams. As a young kid, I was intrigued by sport and especially football, and when it came to picking a side, the logical choice in my head was Melbourne, the city I lived in. But the Melbourne Demons at this time were terrible, and my frustration with them meant my parents suggested picking another team. Eventually, I decided that given my love for cats, and also because Geelong were the reigning premiers in the midst of the 2012 season, off the back of that 2011 flag, that they would be the team for me. For a full 10 years, I thought I had placed some sort of curse on this club, because after that Premiership in 2011, the Geelong Cats were undoubtedly the most consistently good football team in the land, but had nothing to show for it. Run-ins with the two most recent grade dynasties hampered Geelong. After the recent retirement of Cameron Ling, Joel Selwood took over as captain in 2012. After very quickly becoming one of the best players in the league, he was now a young captain working under a young coach, Scott being only 34 when he inherited the Cats' coaching position. Geelong were regular September participants, but it was that damn final series that saw issues. They went down in an elimination final in 2012. In 2013, Geelong choked away a massive lead to lose to Brisbane in a game dubbed by Anthony Hudson in the moment as the miracle on grass, before losing a classic prelim, which finally ended the Kennett curse at 11 matches. The Cats exited in straight sets after losing a semi-final in 2014. They missed the finals in 2015, a year they played one less game than scheduled due to Phil Walsh, coach of Adelaide, dying in the week leading up to a Cats-Crows game, which was ultimately cancelled and led to the points being split. 2016 was, in my view, Geelong's best side between 2012 and 2021. They even won a qualifying final against Hawthorn after Isaac Smith missed a set shot at goal after the siren, but they went down to Sydney in the prelim, who in turn lost to the Bulldogs in the grand final. In 2017, Geelong finished top of the ladder, but lost in a home final to Richmond and lost to Adelaide in a prelim. In 2018, Melbourne got the better of a Geelong team that squeezed into the finals. 2019 saw the Cats again finish top of the ladder, and in a game where no one really knew who was who on a cold, wet night at the MCG, Geelong lost to Collingwood before ending their season with a loss to Richmond in the prelim. 2020 saw most of the season move away from Melbourne because of COVID, but at long last the Cats got to a grand final, and they were in front before Dustin Martin, after his typical disappearing act when the game wasn't on the line, did his also very typical beast mode when it really mattered, which led Richmond to glory. But 2021 was the greatest pain of all. The Cats had added long-time members of other clubs to their side in the aforementioned Isaac Smith and Jeremy Cameron, who spent the previous 10 seasons with GWS. The truth be told, Geelong should have finished top, but that side blew a massive third-quarter advantage. The Cats dropped the minor premiership through their fingers with Max Gawn converting a kick after the final bell to win the minor premiership for Melbourne. When the sides met in the prelim, it was not a contest. I have never watched a final and felt more hopeless, even one-sided grand finals. You can say at least they had a successful year. Geelong hadn't even done that. It was a prelim, sure, but it still felt like a letdown. Add everything together and it felt like a failure. The Geelong Football Club for years were there or thereabouts, and when Scott was asked before the season if they could win it all, he responded, quote, "Yep, I am very confident of that," unquote. Confidence was not something the rest of the footy world had in the Cats. A big red pen came out after that prelim final loss. The team that had refused to go down looked like they were finally going down. They were the oldest team ever, and for the 5th time in 9 years, they failed to get past the preliminary final. While there were legitimate excuses for the poor performance against the Demons, with several key members of the team having been struck down with illness, including Jeremy Cameron, who lost 4 kilograms in 48 hours, those excuses fell on deaf ears. The court of public opinion was not looking well on Scott. The former Lions Premiership defender had a lot of critics, despite having the best winning coach of any coach in the competition. He was also a Premiership coach, only the 6th in the Cats' history, coming in as Mark Thompson's replacement in 2011 and earning the Cats a 3rd flag in 5 years. But that was history, ancient history. Now, the popular theme was they were too old and too slow to be a Premiership contender. They were going into 2022 with 14 players either going on 30 or already having passed that milestone. Despite Scott sticking fat, there were going to be changes. There had to be. Steve Hocking had remained at arm's length from his former club for 4 years as the general manager of football. He is now returning home to fill the shoes of longtime CEO Brian Cook. The coaching panel became a revolving door. After 6 years as assistant coach focused on defence, club legend Matthew Scarlett resigned. Fellow legend Corey Enright went to St Kilda, knowing that he had to test himself in another environment. Former Richmond captain and Essendon coach Matthew Knights had been an assistant at the Cats for 6 years. But he had to go, a victim of the COVID soft cap that reduced coaching staff. He headed to West Coast. They were replaced by three-time Premiership hero James Kelly, plus former Carlton and Adelaide great Eddie Betts, who joined on a part-time role. Richmond Premiership player Sean Grigg had his role upgraded, as well as Scott's former teammate Nigel Lappin rounded out the new-look coaching panel. One thing that had to change was the style. Geelong was too slow, too stop-start with its ball movement, and that was going to change. For the first 9 rounds, Geelong were a rollercoaster of a football team. It started so promising with Geelong, with a smashing victory over Destined in the country game of the MCG. Cameron, in the first game of his second season at the Cattery, was in the game from the get-go, and the Cats flew out the gates and never looked back. Round 2 was one of the most iconic games ever played. Lance Buddy Franklin kicked his 1,000th career goal in a game the Swans won by 30 points. Geelong being very inaccurate in front of goal all night, kicking 10 goals 17. The following year was another special game. It was a record-breaking game for Joel Selwood as he played his 227th game as captain, breaking the record for most games played as the captain. This was the first game that Jack Ginnivan and his Selwood-like tactics surged into the spotlight. But in all seriousness, after a tight first half, Collingwood annihilated the Cats, and many on Twitter jumped to declare that this team was past its best, doubting the ageing Stars and Scott. The Cats, to be fair, did look gone for all money after the Pies kicked 9 goals to 3 in the third. A Josh Dacos goal just under 30 minutes into the quarter put the team in black and white 37 points up, but a late Cameron goal reduced the margin to 30 at the last change. That Cameron goal was the start of a Cats run. Duncan goaled 50 seconds into the quarter. Then Mark Blitzarves, a 2-time club best and fairest, kicked one before it became the Cameron show. He kicked 2 quick goals, and then, not even 17 minutes into the quarter, a Brad Close major levelled the match. Jamie Elliott registered a behind 5 minutes into time on for what would be Collingwood's only score in the last quarter. Cameron and then Tom Hawkins sealed the match for an extraordinary come-from-behind win that looked even more impressive the longer the season went on, as Collingwood would have a great year. Coming from a long way back, the Cats stunned the Pies with an astonishing comeback. I would test positive for COVID on the Monday, a couple of days after this game, though I had a feeling I had it over the previous few days, and it basically recovered by Thursday, but nevertheless I had about a week isolated away from school to marvel at the greatness of that performance. The next 6 weeks were a mixed bag. The Cats beat the Lions in not at all controversial fashion, though the Lions only had themselves to blame really. Then the Hawks got the better of Geelong on Easter Monday, despite Cameron Hawkins and Tyson Stengel kicking 3 goals each. The Cats would bounce back, thrashing North Melbourne in the only game all year the Cats wore a mostly blue jumper. This was followed by a rare loss at home to Freo, then an even rarer game in Canberra, where the Cats were too strong for GWS. In round 9, the Cats went down to St Kilda, in a game where they started strong but fizzled out late. Kane Cornes declared on the round 9 edition of the AFL's The Round So Far that Geelong would still be dangerous because of Hawkins and Cameron, but the Cats would not be winning the Premiership in 2022. After that rather provocative statement from the Corn, Geelong would not only do what they had done over the previous losses in 2022, and that's bounce back, they would follow that up by going on one of the greatest single-season winning streaks in footy history. Geelong had a pair of home matches against the 2 South Australian sides next. At the end of round 9, Geelong was 7th with a strong percentage as a result of a few big wins. Victories by 35 against Port Adelaide and 32 against the Crows got Geelong's season back on track. In round 12, the Cats got their 3rd win straight, the first time they had done that all season. Kicking 7 goals to 1 against the Bulldogs in the first term was enough to get a win, even though the Dogs scored more in the 2nd, 3rd and 4th quarters. Outside of Bailey Smith headbutting Zach Tui and getting a couple of weeks for it, Geelong got to the bye unscathed. So, going into their round 13 bye, the Cats sat 4th on the ladder, trailing only Melbourne, Brisbane and Fremantle. After beating West Coast out in Perth in round 14, where the Eagles put up a decent fight, we headed to a classic Geelong home game at the MCG against Richmond. This was a thriller. Geelong, the most consistent team of the last decade, against the Tigers, the best team over the last half decade. Geelong got the better start, kicking 5 goals to 2 in the first term. Geelong got out to a game-high lead of 35 points, 11 minutes into the second term, but goals to Liam Baker, Dustin Martin and Shai Bolton helped drag the margin down to 20. A 5-goal-to-1 third term from the Tigers led to Richmond leading for the first time in the match. Late in the quarter and turning for home, Richmond led by 5 points. After Tom Lynch goal not quite 6 minutes into the fourth, which was the Tigers' second for the quarter, and the lead now stretched to 17 points, hope looked lost. But dragging the Cats back into the game would be Tyson Stengel, a player who had spent time as a Premiership player in the SANFL with Woodville West Torrens, and had made a host of off-field mistakes in previous years, but he was now back in the AFL system and kicked a goal that worked Geelong back into the game. Brad Close and Cameron kicked majors, and all of a sudden, 3 Geelong goals were hammered home in 5.5 minutes, and Geelong led again. The scoring dried up, and the game was tense until the 26th minute, where Maurice Rioli showed his composure and put Richmond back in front off a set shot. With time running out, Geelong hacked it forward, and coming down with it was Jack Henry. He then nailed a set shot and put Geelong back in front with a minute left. Now, you're probably watching this going, hang on, you haven't mentioned someone who was semi-important in this game. And here he is. With 29 touches and 6 marks, Tom Stewart was a major force in defence, and he sealed the match with an intercept mark. Geelong won by 3 points, but Stewart's ugly late bump on Dion Prestia back in the first quarter, after Prestia had already disposed of the ball, was a big talking point. The media put Stewart to the sword in a way they didn't do to another player who laid a bump after a player had already disposed of the ball. Anyway, Stewart was suspended and he was remorseful for his actions. He received a 4-week ban. As it turned out, Geelong were able to keep winning without him. The following week, Geelong thrashed North Melbourne, who didn't show up. I say that in part because the Roos kicked a grand total of 32 points, but also because they seem to be on the same team as Geelong, because of whatever this is. Hey North, ever heard of a clash jumper? It really could have worked here. I now have an audience interaction question for those of you who are still watching. Let me know in the comments, at what point during the season did Geelong move to Premiership favourites for you? Be honest if it wasn't until quarter time of the grand final, that's okay, but I'd love to know. For me, it was on a cold Thursday night at the end of a game down at the Cattery against Melbourne in round 17. After round 16, these two teams were on top of the ladder with the Demons ahead by 4 points and 4%. By the time the match had finished, Geelong, after a tight first half, grabbed top spot off the back of outscoring Melbourne in the second half, 63 points to 29. Fittingly, it was on the same ground against the same opposition where Geelong's 2021 Premiership hopes died in essence, where their 2022 hopes, like a phoenix rising from the ashes, became impossible to ignore. I remember seeing the scenes after the final siren and believing this team would win the flag. For Geelong, it was about negotiating the last 6 weeks and making their way to September without drama. They beat a Carlton team who spent all but the last week of the season in the 8 by 30 points at the MCG in round 18. At round 19, Geelong battled through a tough match against Port in SA, winning by a margin of 12. Geelong was too good for the Bulldogs again, this time in round 20 by 28 points. Large wins capped off Geelong's season. The Cats won by 45 over the Saints, by 60 over the Suns, and lastly by 85 points over the Eagles in their last game of the season at GMHBA Stadium. Geelong had finished a couple of games ahead of Melbourne, Sydney and Collingwood, the other teams in the top 4. 2 weeks after that Eagles win, thanks pre-finals bye, it was time to face Geelong's kryptonite over the last bloody decade. It was time to enter September. The qualifying final against Collingwood at the MCG is my favourite footy match I have ever seen. It was simply amazing. Twilight at the MCG looks absolutely stunning. We should play more finals like that, perhaps even a grand final. Anyway, Collingwood booked their spot in the top 4 in the famous Grim Reaper match against Carlton in round 23. Geelong playing home finals at the MCG had been a big talking point in the last decade. An opposition to Geelong playing home finals in Geelong is an idea I find indefensible. It wouldn't have changed every final. The one home Geelong final proper saw the Cats lose to the Dockers in 2013. But that Richmond 2017 Premiership team lost to Geelong in Geelong a few weeks before they beat the Cats in the qualifying final. Collingwood still has not played at the Cattery since 1999. Nathan Buckley was playing for the Pies in that match. That's how long ago that was. Most people had moved on though, especially considering a new stand was being built at GMHBA Stadium, so there was a reduced capacity. Not that I moved on, I'll never let this go until we stop this rot. Anyway, Geelong were at least given a time preferential for their fans, off the back of them being minor premiers. And so at precisely 4:35pm, the match began. This game was a thriller because of the intensity that both teams brought to the match right from the start. Geelong got a big opportunity early in the game after Gary Rowan marked inside 50, but he missed his set shot. Patrick Lipinski laid a free kick winning tackle and converted the set shot for the game's first goal. It was all Collingwood in the early moments of the game. They had repeat inside 50s but missed some opportunities. Geelong had its own big chances early. Tyson Stengel mowed down Isaac Quaynor for holding the ball, but he too missed a set shot. Brody Myercheck goaled off the back of a Jamie Elliott set shot that fell short. Collingwood would take a 14-point lead into quarter time, with a late Jeremy Cameron goal being Geelong's first. Collingwood continued its attack in the second term, but missed more chances at goal. Tom Hawkins made them pay in the 6th minute, and that dragged momentum to the Cats. Max Holmes should have further cut that lead, but he fumbled and turned the ball over. Later, Patrick Dangerfield found Gary Rowan deep inside 50, and he converted, and the Cats had kicked 3 straight. The Cats' intensity had lifted, shown when Holmes ran down Josh Dacos before the Pie pushed over Holmes and gave away a 50-metre penalty. Brody Myercheck marked inside 50, but he played on and butchered the play, while Geelong went down the other end and Brad Close kicked a goal. 2 minutes into time on and put Geelong in front. Jake Kolodjasny was subbed out during the second quarter with a knee injury for Mark O'Connor. Geelong had all the play late in the term, but Will Hoskin-Elliott kicked a goal after the siren, and Collingwood at half-time led by 1 point. Such a great quarter for Geelong, and yet they trailed. The third term started slowly. It took until the 11th minute until Ash Johnston kicked the first goal of the quarter, but goals to Mitch Duncan and Rowan in succession put the Cats back in front. After no goals through the first 11 minutes, there were 4 in 9 minutes. Ash Johnston kicked a crazy goal from the boundary to extend Collingwood's lead from 1 to 7. Then moments later, Jeremy Cameron nailed a very similar shot. This game was insane. One last goal from Jamie Elliott meant Collingwood led by 7 at the last change, but the game was anyone's. Collingwood struck first blood in the last term off Jordan De Goey, then Jeremy Cameron instantly responded at the other end. The Pies had several more inside 50s and attacking chances from there, but weren't able to hit the scoreboard, with both teams' back 6 standing tall. Geelong finally broke the deadlock after winning a crucial contest on the wing, with Close finishing the play, and Geelong led by a single point. De Goey was crucial for the Pies, and with 5 minutes left, he banged through a goal from 50 metres out to put Collingwood back in front. Even I was cheering for that goal to go through. This game was so amazing, I forgot who I was barracking for. But when I came back to earth, I realised that Geelong really needed to kick 2 goals in the last 5 minutes to seal it. And I was right. Zach Tui marks the ball in the back half of the square and pumps it all the way to centre half forward. And leaping over the pack is Gary Rowan. Rowan knows pressure. He has kicked 2 goals after the siren for 2 different teams. But the constant criticism of him was he was a bit of a disappearing act in finals, and that was definitely true. But today, he's been amazing. And yes, he won't play a major role in the next 2 games of the season, but today was his day. He nailed that long-range goal, and Geelong led again. A rush shot from Jake Crisp levelled the scores not long after. Geelong now needed another goal. A rush shot from Josh Dacos went out on the full, and with the Channel 7 clock showing 2 minutes left, Geelong went the length of the MCG.
Dangerfield arrives. Howe matched him in the air at the front. Stewart a fumble. McCreary got through the first and the second tackle. Dispossessed. Claims of ball. Play on. That's what Stewart does. Nurdles a kick forward. Cam Guthrie gave it to Duncan. Instant pressure. Kept his head. Handball back to Guthrie. He spots Jeremy Cameron. It bounces for him beautifully. He kicks off that left boot. It's Gary Rowan. He dropped it. It bounces back. It has to be a goal. He handballed it off. And Holmes sends it home. They took the country road, but they are in front.
It was not the cleanest passage of play, but it was enough. Collingwood could not counter. The clock strikes 0. The siren goes. The Cats had won. The preliminary final that occurred a couple of weeks later was not a thriller like the qualifying final was. In the match against the Brisbane Lions under the Friday night lights of the G, Patrick Dangerfield kicked the first major inside the minute, and while Lincoln McCarthy did level the game in the 11th minute, that was as close as Brisbane would get to victory all evening. When Stengel put Geelong back in front in the 20th minute, the Lions never levelled terms again, let alone lead. It was all Geelong from there on in. After leading by 14 points at quarter time, the Cats kicked 10 goals to 2 combined across the second and third quarters. As a matter of fact, Geelong outscored the Lions in every quarter, as that team's then struggles at the MCG continued. Dangerfield had a blinder with 28 touches and a couple of goals in there as well. Also important was Zach Toohey and Mitch Duncan. Both men never the most talked about players on this team, but when the sharing gets into their hands, brilliant stuff usually happens, and they had been essential for Geelong. In the end, Geelong ran out winners by a margin of 71 points, kicking a total of 18 goals throughout that preliminary final on a Friday night, and Geelong were in to yet another grand final. Nothing went wrong for Geelong, with one big exception. Halfway through the third quarter, Max Holmes injured his hamstring, and his reaction said it all. Even though it was not confirmed until the morning of the grand final itself, he would not take part in the big dance on the last Saturday in September. And what a day that was. It was a beautiful day in Melbourne. The sun was shining, it was back at the MCG, and as a day game for the first time since 2019. COVID forced the 2020 and 2021 grand finals to be moved away from the G. Robbie Williams certainly entertained the MCG in the pre-game entertainment, but it was all about the two grand finalists. For the first time since that round 2 game where Lance Franklin kicked his 1000th career goal, it was going to be a battle between the Geelong Cats and the Sydney Swans. So here we are, Geelong's 17th grand final, well, 18th overall if you want to count that 1878 match that unofficially decided the VFA Premiership, in front of a crowd of 100,024. Tom Hawkins opened the scoring in the opening minute of the match with a behind. Geelong dominated play through the first 10 minutes. It looked like how Geelong wanted the match to be, but couldn't quite score until the 10th minute when Hawkins grabbed the ball straight out of the ruck and snapped home the first goal of the afternoon. 5 minutes later, Hawkins rinse and repeat, kicked his and Geelong's second goal. Sydney, off the ensuring centre clearance, scored their first goal with Will Hayward in the 17th minute. But after that, it was all Geelong. The Cats kicked 3 goals in the next 5 minutes from Mark Blitzarfs, and the star of the quarter, Isaac Smith, popping up everywhere. He kicked a couple of goals in a couple of minutes on the run. Geelong scored 5 more times, but only Brad Close managed to kick another goal. The Cats led by 35 points at quarter time. It could have been more, and many neutrals thought this game was already over. The second quarter was a much more competitive one. In the 5th minute, Tyson Stengel nailed a goal from 50, continuing what had been a brilliant season and a brilliant story for him. After this, Sydney became much more competitive. Hayden McLean and Callum Mills each goaled, with Hawkins adding his third in between. Stengel kicked a goal after the clock ticked into time on, but a late mistake with Selwood and Buse failing to connect resulted in Isaac Heaney kicking a late goal, and the margin was now 36 points. Geelong was firmly in front, but there was still a chance that Sydney could drag their way back into this match. And then the third quarter happened. Now, after Geelong jumped out to that fast start, there was one number in my head as I watched this match live. That number was 44. That was the largest margin that any team has ever come back from to win a V/AFL Grand Final. Carlton against Collingwood in 1970. I thought only when Geelong passed this mark did the Cats have it all wrapped up. Mitch Duncan laid a run-down tackle 20 metres from goal right at the start of the third quarter and converted the set shot, and then Brad Close goal to take Geelong's lead to 48. Even then, I still didn't feel confident, and then Isaac Smith kicked his third goal of the day, celebrated like mad, and as James Brayshaw describes, it's raining goals. That was the moment I could finally relax. Cam Guthrie and 2 goals from Stengel, including one accompanied by Cameron Ling, added cherries on top of the cake. Ling knew he would be presenting the Premiership Cup shortly. At three-quarter time, Geelong led 101-27. They had only allowed 1 Sydney point for the entire third quarter. It is as dominant of a quarter as we've ever seen in a grand final. The last quarter was party time. Everyone was grabbing goals who deserved it. Jeremy Cameron kicked a goal in the 7th minute, then Brandon Parfitt, the sub who'd just come onto the ground. Just before time on, it looked like Patrick Dangerfield, who was great all day, might grab one. But in the end, it was Sam De Koning, the brilliant rookie back who had shown so much composure all year taking intercept marks, kicks his first career goal. In the 24th minute, Geelong went forward again, and taking possession was Joel Selwood. He'd captained this team since 2012. The future Hall of Famer was one of the most courageous players of all time. He single-handedly changed the sport's rules regarding high tackles due to his play style, finding loopholes that exploited the rules. And for many Cats fans of my generation, including me, he was our favourite player. Selwood, however, was never much of a threat in the scoring stakes. Not that you'd know from this kick.
Outside of the boot, hangs it up, it floats! Oh, captain! My captain! Perhaps the signature moment of the 2022 Grand Final. Joel Selwood, surrounded by his teammates, for years of loyal service, for all the records that have come his way. He's going to finish the day with the Premiership Cup in hand, and his legacy soars yet further.
Sporting fairy tales are rare. Most don't get to sign off in the perfect way, but Joel would. There wasn't any talk about Selwood retiring in the lead-up, at least from my memory. Only a handful of senior Geelong people knew. Not every one of his fellow teammates knew, until this moment, when it just felt so perfect that that was going to be the end of it all. Cameron kicked one last goal and let everyone know where his mind was at. Geelong had changed so much about itself going into 2022, and it paid the greatest reward.
Final moment is a boundary throw in. It is a premiership gloriously won. A Geelong side forever in contention, entirely reimagined to be hailed now as champions. And for Chris Scott, his second flag is testament to his genius. Geelong in a grand final romp by 81 points.
Entirely reimagined indeed, Jared. For the 10th time, Geelong had won a V/AFL flag. It was the club's 17th seniors premiership. The first to be done wearing blue shorts in the grand final. The second one for Chris Scott, now a two-time premiership coach, as well as being a two-time premiership player with Brisbane. His reinvention of the wheel had worked. Geelong had done it with the oldest team ever assembled in league history. Leaving Holmes out was the right decision in the end, especially after seeing Sydney gamble with Sam Reid, who had to be subbed out. There were many standouts in what was Geelong's 16th straight win of the season. Despite Dangerfield playing a blinder, it was Isaac Smith who was deservingly picked as the winner of the Norm Smith Medal for Best on Ground. On the podium, Selwood announced the Premiership Cup was coming home where it belonged, down the highway. He would announce his retirement a few days later. On that day, he didn't want to make it all about him, but rather about that team. When that new stand at GMHBA was finally built, the Cats named it after Joel Selwood, which shows you how important he was to that team and that era. Chris Scott was so thankful for all the people, and particularly sponsors, that stuck fat with the AFL and Geelong since the outbreak of COVID. The sport really needed them. And then the cup was raised, and something interesting happened. Normally, after captain and coach lift the cup and the rest of the team runs to the podium, the coach gets out of the way, which I always found weird. But Scott stayed a little bit longer, and he is in those photos of the team celebrating the premiership. He so richly deserved this premiership. He was one of a few people who were a constant during those years of being so close yet so far, and he really deserved another flag. There are a few people I want to shout out. The first is Sammy the Waterboy. Sam Morfitt, who has Down syndrome, had been working with Geelong, the team he has supported his whole life since 2015. After the grand final had finished, Joel Selwood embraced Sammy and helped him onto the MCG to celebrate the premiership, with Jeremy Cameron handing him his medal. The AFL posted the video on Twitter, which then went viral on the web. Sammy also got his hand on the Premiership Cup. It wasn't Joel's only touching moment of the day, as he carried Gary Ablett's son Levi onto the MCG as the Cats ran out, and he gifted his boots to Oz Kicker of the Year, Archie. The next is a story that comes from Jared Waitley. The day after the grand final, he bumped into Robin, the mother of Ethan, a 13-year-old Geelong supporter who lived in a wheelchair with a chronic illness and who died on the 21st of May, the day Geelong beat Port and began that magical 16-game winning streak. The Cats did not lose since his passing. Robin used to take Ethan to the club and the players would greet him. Watching from the MCG stand, she had sobbed through Robbie Williams' Angels, had found special meaning as Selwood carried Levi through the banner, and had completely broken down at the final siren. She called Jared the day after their encounter on his Monday show.
Robin's in Ashburton. She's in my hood. Hello to you, Robin.
How are you, Jared?
I'm well. How are you?
You may remember meeting... Good, thank you. You may remember meeting me yesterday morning.
I do.
At
It's
the
been the
IGA.
highlight of my weekend, Robin.
I'm so glad. Thank you. Jared, I know I gave you a fair story about Ethan, but I did just want to reiterate what you were saying about Joel Selwood. I can only say he's one of the most beautiful humans I've ever met. To go out of his way to make sure that we were cared for and looked after whenever we were down at the club, whether it be for a club photo with the team or just down there for a family day. He made sure that Ethan and I were out of the cold, even if we were okay. And I'd say, no, that's okay. He said, no, follow me. I'll make sure you're okay. To think that Ethan passed on the 21st of May at night, that evening, Geelong never lost another game. And as I said to you, and you told the story this morning, that I still think that they won it for Ethan. And I, as you can tell, I'm a little bit emotional still, but I'll hold that memory forever. My eldest son, emailed the club after Ethan had passed, and the club sent us a beautiful card, and if I may just quickly read that to you.
Please do.
Dear Robin, Derek and family, on behalf of the Geelong Cats Football Club, we pass on our sincerest condolences to you all on the passing of Ethan. We are grateful for the opportunities our club and players had to meet with Ethan. You have supported us for so long. Now it is time for us to support you and send our love to you all during this difficult time. Warmest regards, Steve Hocking and Joel Selwood. And as I said to you, it's those memories that will stay with me forever. They might be small things to some people, but when you've lost a child, you hold on to those memories of people that have just gone out of their way to do special things for you. And Joel particularly, but Geelong Football Club will always be special to us. I've purchased a little Premiership bed that I'll put on Ethan's bed. And yes, as I said, I will always hold that memory. We're off to the Best and Fairest on Thursday, so I'm hoping I can give him a quick hug at some point and thank him in person for doing it for Ethan, I'd say. But yes, thank you for indulging me, Jared, and I'm so glad to have met you yesterday in the supermarket, so I can, pass it on to you.
Robin, I will always consider myself blessed that our trip to the IGA yesterday morning coincided. I told the story to Claire through tears later in the day. It was so deeply affecting to hear it, Robin, and my thoughts are with you, and you've made a believer of me. They did do it for Ethan.
I think from Selwood bringing Sammy onto the MCG, the players embracing Ethan while he was still alive, dressing up as old people on Mad Monday, and Jeremy Cameron chasing a cow in the middle of the night trying to get his medal back, that tells us a lot about this club and the great, loving, caring, fun people who play for it. As for the TV ratings, they were in the toilet, the worst performing grand final figure since 1993, off the back of two very highly rated figures playing at night in the previous two seasons, with this one going back to afternoon. Go figure. So, that's it. I've covered all of Geelong's flags. Now, to answer the inevitable question, yes, if Geelong win another flag in either the AFL men's or women's competition, as long as I'm still sane, I will aim to do a video on it. But if I never live to do a part 6, it won't matter, because this Premiership, that 2022 grand final, was enough for me. I loved that team so much, and after a decade of being so close but so far, that flag might just be the most deserved in V/AFL history. Geelong were allegedly too old and too slow. Well, on grand final day, they were way, way, way too good. I would love to see another one, but that team won't be forgotten, and neither will this club. Long live the Geelong Cats. Hi everybody, it's Lorenzo here, just popping in at the end of this video to say a very big thank you for watching, especially if you watched the entire series. In the last 5 seconds of this video, over the title card, you will see the full playlist pop up and you can click and go back and watch any of the old episodes if you haven't already. Thank you very much for sticking with me. This video was supposed to come out at the end of February, and let's be honest, every single video in this series didn't go out exactly when it was planned. Like I said, this video was supposed to come out at the end of February, but me doing a trip to Moama with a friend of mine, getting sick, and just juggling a bunch of different things, including my second year at uni, added a few days and eventually a few weeks into the entire planning for this video and delaying its upload. I will very soon publish what I plan to upload to this channel in March. Make sure to check out my other work, of course, at Extra Time Media. We're going to put in some few people this week, and hopefully they will be able to help us in our endeavours to grow over there. You can also check out my work at the Australian Cricket Society. I've recently published one article, and a second one should be coming up hopefully soon enough. So make sure to check out my work there. Thank you very much to John Harms, who's been mentoring me as I begin that particular little thing I'm doing this year. I am balancing, as I've already mentioned, my second year at uni, so don't expect every single video to be uploaded according to the upload schedule, but I will be trying my very best, and I may be even giving you insights into what I'm doing. That might be a hint at a little series I have planned that may or may not be starting later this month or next month. Well, that's just about all I have. The only other thing I will say is, if you haven't already, can you please check out my video on the 2007 Cricket World Cup? Bizarrely enough, that video got taken down, and I do have a copyright strike over this channel, so I'm being very careful with what I do on this channel at the moment. This is really the only video that I'm slightly worried about. Weirdly though, all the old views I got for that video count on my channel's analytics for some reason. But if you haven't checked it out, please do so. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you very shortly. Thank you, Internet.